Welcome to week 2 of We Should Be Working. I'm Zach Hendricks, and with me, as always, is Jeff. Jeff, how are you doing this week?
Hey, I'm doing pretty good, Zach. It's good to be here. Happy to be doing episode 2 of our new podcast.
Indeed. I went back and started listening to a lot of it. It was the perfectionist in me wanted to go back, and I was very tempted a few times to go and I had text messages ready to go that was saying like, we got to redo the whole thing. We got to go back. We got to change all of this. I hate everything, but it's almost always directed at myself, and it just speaks to a lot of the times of how I wanted to be an actor when I was a kid, and then I was like, no, I don't. And you hate seeing yourself perform. Go behind the camera. So I don't know. How did you feel about? Did you have any of that with yourself, or are you a little bit more self-assured?
Well, I mean, self-assured, that's debatable at points, but I feel like, we record it, it's a one shot, it's put it out there, it is who we are in that moment, and we're going to grow and we're going to get better each time. And so I definitely have perfectionist tendencies as well, and they can get me in trouble. So I try to, especially when I'm working with somebody else, I like am a lot more able to, I guess, bypass those perfectionist tendencies, because we're in a mutual project. But if it's just me, boy, I have a hard time finishing projects, completing it. I'll be self-critical, no doubt about it. But, it's our first episode. We got to put it out there. This is who we are. So it is what it is.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it just reminds me of it's like if I do a portfolio or something like that, I'm going to spend way too much time on something that doesn't even matter. And you and I were talking about where I was like, eventually I'd probably like to do a show open for all of this. And I was like, it's not going to be something that I can just spend 2 hours on. Probably going to be spending days, weeks trying to design this, get it going. And it's going to be hard for me to do something very simplistic and stylized that I'm just like, I'll just do something quick and easy. I was like, I will take way too much time on it. What are you working on right now? Anything fun? Anything exciting?
Well, I'm working on some music. I've got an 80s synthwave pop track in the works that I'm liking how it's coming out. I haven't been making music for, well, it's been maybe about 6 months since the last track I produced, but I've taken a break from it. But I watched some movie a couple weeks ago, and it was like it had an 80s soundtrack, and I was like, oh, I kind of like these songs. Let me see if I can put something together with a similar chord progression and melody, and things took off from there. And I'm working with another collaboration partner to do like a synth keyboard solo in there. He's somebody I worked with before, so that's cool. I'm really happy with how it's turning out so far. What about you?
Is well, I was going to ask you real quick, and then we'll get into the boring stuff of what I'm working on. When you're working on music, do you find it? I think when people get into their processes, as far as, oh, I'm much more of a get the melody together. If you're doing something with lyrics along those lines, the lyrics come first. Is there a way for you? Because for me, once again, for everybody, I'm not a musician. I know you see the guitars back there and think maybe I'm even being humble. I'm not. I'm horrible. I think I know 4 chords.
That's all you
But
need.
so I'm always fascinated by it. Music is another medium where it's like music, movies, TV shows. That's how I feel like I relate to the world. So I'm fascinated by how people write it. Do you see yourself as more of a melody person, or you're listening to a song and you're like, oh, I like something in there. Let me go play with that. Do you feel like ideas come to you? Do you hear lyrics first and then you put a melody to it? What's some of your flow on that?
Well, I'm definitely a melody person and lyrics person last. It's funny, as much as I write, I don't write good lyrics, in my opinion. I have a hard time with it. They always seem corny to me. And when I'm listening to songs, or I mean, remembering songs, it's not the lyrics that I remember, it's the melody of the lyrics. So I typically, well, I'm a drummer, so I think about the rhythm mostly, and then the melody is what I'm kind of interested and excited to explore this time. Is how chords work with melody and why it sounds good and it draws an emotion out of me. Like, why does this particular chord with this melody make me feel this? And so I try to explore that, and that's usually what encourages me to make a song, is that initial urge to explore that feeling and that how it works.
Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting. The more that I talk to musicians or even anybody writing music, like I was talking with a friend the other day who was going to perform live for the first time, and he was talking about some of his music that he had written and how he came up with it. So hearing musicians talk about, I'm sure for them it's just as annoying sometimes as somebody asking about graphic design or videos. It's kind of like asking, where do you get your ideas? And you're like, it's a famous like dumb question from Norm Macdonald, but it's like, it really is like, it's difficult to explain. Like it just kind of comes to you, or you work out in this process, and it comes from everywhere or anything and all of that. But it's really fascinating to hear about. But I imagine it's kind of the same when people hearing me ask about how do you do it. It's like, well, just kind of put pen to paper and go down and start drumming, and it'll go.
Right.
As far as what I'm working on, not much. So last week was my official last working week on my job, and it was a really weird, awkward experience, much more than I thought so. So I've been laid off from jobs before, and I don't remember it being as weird or awkward, but I remember being in like a last minute panic. Again, kind of this perfectionist where I'm like, I need to get all of my files uploaded. Is this up there? Oh, is that? Are they going to need this? Do they need that? And I'm like panicking to do that and get everything done. And then the whole process was very unceremonious. Like nobody even told me like, hey, take your badge over here. Or, hey, you need to go drop off your computer equipment with these guys. So I'm just kind of like, hey, do you guys want this? Like my badge? And they're like, oh yeah, sure, I'll take it later. And it was very weird and uninformed that it felt kind of, I don't know, it didn't have a lot of finality with it. So it felt kind of odd that I'm like, I hope I left everything okay. Because for me, especially, I have a lot of pride in my own professionalism, or what I hope is professionalism. That I want to leave everything good. I don't want to have anybody come back and be like, look at how much Zach screwed us over. Look at how much he left behind, and he didn't do this or he didn't do that. So I want to, it really doesn't even bother me if I'm like, if you guys need to call me like 2 weeks later to get this, because the worst feeling for me is thinking that I'm putting somebody else out. Like I don't want to have anybody else work harder because of my actions. That bothers me quite a bit. But so now I'm trying to figure out what I want to work on. And it's kind of interesting that we were talking about the show open, because I think I'm going to start just doing, for lack of a better term, some little spec work of like, what's a little 5-second video that I could make that I've kind of always wanted to do, or a shot I've wanted to get. And so maybe I'll go do something and I'll find something around and go shoot this and edit this, and then maybe get something else that I can throw in my portfolio. So I've got some more recent work, but other than that, I'm just coaching my kids' hockey teams. We had a hockey
Hey,
tournament this weekend,
that's
and
that's a lot.
it's a ton of work. And I mean, I think you and I even talked, and I thought I was going to have a ton of time this weekend, because I'm like, oh, we've only got like 4 or 5 games over 2 days. 4 or 5 games wipes you for an entire day. You have to get there an hour early, then you play, then you're talking with parents and stuff afterwards, and you get home, get some food, kind of rest for a minute. Now you're off to the next game. And then before you know it, I'm like, it's 10:30 at night. I'm definitely not working right now. I'm just wiped. So that was my weekend, but we did come home with a championship, so that felt good. So
Well,
so
that's
yeah, so that
awesome.
was good.
So you
Um,
got,
yeah,
well,
go ahead.
let me respond to that. So you got laid off and you had your last work week there, and it was kind of weird and unceremonious. And you left and you're done with that. But you also have to coach your kids' hockey team, which is a lot of work too. And I assume you're may be getting paid for that as a coach. Nope, not
Volunteer.
volunteer. Okay, so again, here's things that we do with our time that we care about, that is important to us, but it doesn't bring in any money. And it just makes me think about like that. So much of the stuff that we do that we love doesn't make us money, and the things that make us money are things that we don't like to do. I mean,
It's really fascinating, and I was gonna start talking about this, but I was like, well, you're rambling enough here. Is as I've gotten older, I think one of the reasons that I like video, or like usually the role that I play in video, which is directing and producing, is I'm one of those people that I actually like managing stuff. I like having a project. I like being able to put all of the pieces together And when it comes together great, it's a very satisfying feeling. So as far as work goes, producing and directing videos is very much that's the job. Even though directors are very, very involved in movies and it's good for them to know all of the process, they're technically not doing any of the work. You've got a director of photography that's shooting for you. You've got your sound guy, your lighting, all of that stuff. You're telling other people what to do and when to do it. That's very satisfying for me, which is why I think I like coaching. And coaching my kids, obviously, is especially satisfying. But I've been coaching them for about, I think we're going on about 7 or 8 years now, for when I started doing it. And I was like, oh man, I wish I would have realized this earlier. I was like, I think I want to keep coaching as much as I can because to your point, I was like, if I even the thought of as they're getting older, and I'm like, I'm not going to be able to coach them much longer. They're going to be out of sports. They're going to be out of it in a position where a volunteer coach is needed. Now you're getting to paid coaches, professional sports, college, things like that. And I'm like, well, I'm not at that level, but now I wish that I was. And I'm like, oh, well, that's a whole other range to get into. How do I do that? How do I get in there? Because I think if I could keep coaching for the rest of my life, I could even leave the creative arts behind and keep it as a hobby. It's very satisfying for me, especially I think mainly for the kids, is that working with other people, and I don't know about for you, the arts can be a very much a solo act, but for me, again, with video and movies, you usually have a lot of people around you
Right.
as you're working. I really like that collaboration, but what I like the most is when you have a plan that seems crazy, and not to say that I'm like, oh, I love it when everybody disagrees with me and I prove them right. It's not that. It's you have a crazy idea that everybody's like, this sounds nuts, but then they go and do it and they go, oh, I get it. So like for the kids, when you're like, no, 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 here's what you want to do. Go up and do it this way. And then when they go and do it, they go, oh my God, Coach was right. That was huge. And I'm like, yeah, I'm giving you a fun basic skill. Just like if I was to
Yeah.
teach anybody video production or video editing. So it's yeah, I wish I was getting paid to coach these teams because it is
Gosh.
probably my favorite thing in the world as I've gotten older.
Wow. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I kind of like coaching and mentoring too. I don't do enough of it. But I feel like at this point in my career, I should be finding myself in more of a mentorship or leadership role. And since I've taken such a hiatus, I've really haven't interacted with many people at all, really at all. So the creative arts are a solo project. So you find yourself just head down doing the task, and it's kind of like life and work is so much fun when there's other people you can share it with, and if you can like coach someone and kind of see them grow, because it's a lot easier sometimes to help coach somebody else to do the thing that you want to do that you're just not able to do yourself. So there's something about like living vicariously through the folks that you coach and getting to see them flourish. Yeah.
Very, very much so. I mean, that's what I tell my kids in hockey. So I coach hockey and football. But I tell them in especially football, because I never even played football, but I'm like, look, I'm not here because I'm an amazing player. I'm here to hopefully make you an amazing player. I know a lot about this. I can help you get there. But me being really good at this is not required for me to be a good coach at all of this.
Right.
It can be helpful. It usually is helpful in one way, shape, or form, but it's not always a requirement because sometimes, you'll have the little kids like want to challenge you, like, oh, I could do this better than you. I'm like, I sure hope so. I was like, let's hope so. You should be. So yeah, Tom Brady can throw way better than Bill Belichick.
Oh,
That
of
was
course.
that was never up for debate. So yeah. Well, and so that being said, when did you have anybody kind of mentoring you when you were starting out? Like you're starting out in the arts, in the creative fields. Was there anybody there mentoring you? Is that anything that you sought out, or was it more enjoyable for you to be like, I can this is my escape from everybody?
Yeah, no, it was definitely an escape from everybody, but I had my art teachers in school that seemed to take to me and want to help me get better. They definitely gave me that support, just my elementary school art teachers and then my middle school and high school teachers not only tried to coach me to be a better artist, but kind of helped prepare me for a career in the arts. They're like, hey, you're when you become a professional artist, it's going to be kind of like this. And you're going to have to learn how to promote yourself, and not everyone's going to like the stuff that you do, and But I wouldn't say that I had like a very intimate mentor with this. It was self-driven, and then I kind of had some support of some adults and my friends. So
That's still really amazing to me, and it makes me extraordinarily jealous that at that young of an age you had somebody say, "Hey, when you're doing this professionally, here's what you're kind of going to need to do or keep in mind," and all of that. I'm extraordinarily jealous of that. I think for me, a lot of times, like we talked a little bit about it last week, where didn't 100% know what I wanted to do and kind of just latched onto other people. And that was, I think, one of the bigger downfalls of even where I went to school. They had no focus on the arts really there at all. While they did, and they had programs for it, it was all of the focus was on sports. And so when you tell them you wanted to go to film school, they're like, all of the college advisors are like, "Did you say law school or film school?" And I'm like, "Film school." And they go, "Oh, well, I don't know then. If you have law school, then sure, we'll get you wherever you want to go." And I didn't have any teacher like that. I don't think ever really said that, or at least not that I remember at all. I know I had some that wanted to reach out. They liked me as a performer because I started performing when I was 11.
Performing
I had a
what?
juggling show at
Oh,
the
okay.
Renaissance Festival. So
Very nice.
I auditioned for the Renaissance Festival as like a summer job, and then me and my buddy got hired, and then we did that up until I was 18 years old. And so I was performing, and most of my mentorship was around performing. But as we've discussed, I didn't want to perform. I didn't realize it at the time. I kind of did, but I couldn't even get really cast in plays. I think if I could do it all over again, if somebody would have put me more on the trajectory as maybe like a stand-up, might have been better. But I was very resistant when people were like, "Oh, you should be like these guys, like this juggling group," and I'm like, "I don't like the juggling. I'm doing that for money. It's not something that it's like my passion or anything like that." So it was a weird relationship where it's such a weird skill for people to have, and it's a weird skill to have as a job that people are like, "Oh, you must love that." It's not that I hated it either, but I was like, this is just a means to an end for me. It's a way for me to get money and go hang out with my buddy and some other people. But
Yeah.
I was not like, I want to be the best juggler in the world. That was never a thing for me. So
Right.
with
And
you
many
and
of
your
the people,
teachers,
well, many of the people at the
oh, go on.
Renaissance Fair are so passionate that they're going to school you because they're like, they live, breathe, and eat this stuff, the characters, the mythology. And if you're just doing it for money, well, you're just going to get steamrolled by these people that are just like, yay, this is where I get to go be my true self.
Yeah. Well, and then that being said, the one probably best mentor that I did have in my life, that I met him when I was 11, and we stayed in touch. I haven't unfortunately talked to him in a long time, but it was, he was a friend for through the years. Like, he met my wife and everything like that. Really kind of like, believe it or not, the Renaissance Festival is a horrible place for an 11-year-old kid to be
I can
exposed
imagine.
to without parental guidance.
Oh, yeah, I can
It
imagine.
was traumatic. Some of the people there were some of the worst people I've met in my life. Not a good situation for a kid. Fortunately, I had some other people there, but this guy kind of came over and was like, "Hey, maybe steer clear of some of this stuff." And he could juggle and do all that, and then helped us improve our show, but came about it much more as a friend as opposed to, "Oh, do it this way, do it that way, do it that way." It was much more life skills in retrospect, as far as here's how you can get through this experience without being scarred for life, and put a smile on your face,
Yeah.
and all of that, and maybe learn some life skills along the way. But in all honesty, I probably owe him the most credit for even sticking in the creative arts and all of that, and just seeing like, oh, this you can do. Once again, I keep punching the mic. Sorry, people. You can do, even if it's not paying well, do what you like, do what you want to do. If this is what you want to do and this is your summer job, like he made a living off of traveling the fairs. So, very much a carny lifestyle, almost like a gypsy lifestyle in a way, is how a lot of those people live. And he was fine with that, but he was also very different than there was a lot of like stealing, theft, kind of criminals, drug use amongst that crowd as well. And so there was kind of two different camps, and he was much more on the I'm going to stay by myself in my trailer. Me and my cat hang out. Got a couple buddies over here. We look out for each other. But he was probably my bigger inspiration. As far as your art teachers go, so you're saying even in elementary school, are you saying elementary school or mostly high school that people started pointing out that they realized how strong of an artist that you were?
Even in elementary school, I had,
Really?
yeah, my teachers, I loved art class. So, I would always be staying after time, and I was always so happy to do the projects. And, I just had very good teachers that were enthusiastic and wanted to show me how and were giving me good feedback. So,
Did you have a pretty broad education when it came to all of that? Meaning, like, did you do all the same stereotypical stuff that we did, where it's like, oh, you have a little bit of ceramics, a little
yeah,
bit of like, you're going to sew this pillow type of
yeah,
thing, painting, drawing,
yeah,
all of that stuff?
pretty much. I do remember there was like, we did paper mache, and we had to create like
Oh,
a
yeah.
monster or something. And that was a really exciting project for me. I think I was in fourth grade. And at that time, I had inspiration to be like a movie director or something like that. So special effects makeup was what I aspired to as like an elementary school kid. So movies like The Gremlins or Jurassic Park or things like that, and I was like, oh, we get to make a monster out of this paper mache. So I got really into that, and my little monster was like featured in like like the high school like display case, or
Oh,
something like that. So
yeah, you got
some
the
of the
you
work
got
I
the
would I would
features.
do would get featured in the display case, and I would be all proud to like walk by it or whatever.
Yeah, did they ever do where they did like a student sale of art or anything stuff like that? Like for us, they would do sometimes on like a back to school night or like an alumni weekend, something like that. They would sell artwork, and so it was a big deal. Like somebody bought his sculpture for $50. I'm like, $50? Oh my God,
Wow.
that's incredible. Like those were always like the real artists of the school were the ones that got like stuff purchased, things like that. Did you ever sell anything when you were younger?
No, I don't think about any. I don't think there was anything sold, but my high school teachers did kind of coach us to get into the county fairs and put our work into the fairs to be judged. And if you would win the ribbon if you got first place, second place, or whatever. So I did that, and I won a little bit of awards there, but nothing sold that I can think of. I can't remember.
How was art at that time as a vehicle for you socially? Like amongst friends and family, was it a big deal? Like I remember I had two friends in high school that could draw very well. And that was almost like, oh my God, have you seen how he draws? Like I was always so jealous of all of that. And it was a big deal amongst friends. And then like for family, my older sister was a bit of an artist and could draw pretty well and had really, fun creative paintings and drawings and all of that. And that was a big deal in our family that my parents would always make a big deal out of the arts. Was that anything for you? Was it a vehicle to get chicks? So,
Well, no, it wasn't exactly a vehicle to get chicks. No, that's for sure. But I did have a lot of my buddies that really loved it. And I mean, I would get attention from girls for my drawings, but I didn't know how to translate that into dating or anything like that. I just got
yeah.
embarrassed and I got shy. Um, but no, so I definitely got the clout from the classmates, so that I began to identify as the artist, as the artistic kid. So then there was a couple friends I think in seventh grade that would commission me to do art for them, and
Oh, really?
they might pay me like $5 or lunch money or something silly like that, or trade me some magic cards or something like that, and I would draw them the magic cards that they wanted me to do. But this one kid had me do a drawing a day, and he kept all of my drawings in a binder, and so he was collecting them, and he had like over 200 drawings, and I think I would draw like characters from Sonic the Hedgehog and Mortal Kombat, and whatever
Uh,
Tekken and video games that we would be playing, so, and magic cards. So that's where all of my design inspiration would come from. I'd be drawing those characters. I'd draw baseball cards and football cards, so I'd be copying the people on the cards. I was really into sports at the time, watching them and playing them in the backyard. Not in the school though. But anyway, like, yeah. So he pursued that, and it was so funny. So I was like, it was study hall, and he's like, Jeff, you got to get your drawing done for me. And I was like, all right, I'm working on it, And so yeah, so that was fun. It
Remember,
was a
you promised.
good way to keep going.
Remember, I gave you beef jerky already. Where's my card? Where's my
Oh,
baseball
exactly.
card? That's great. And so, well, that's kind of interesting then. So you're doing all of this drawing, which that, by the way, that'd be a great coffee table book if you could ever track that kid down with all these original drawings like Jeff Finley, the early days.
Well,
And,
he actually gave it to me. I
oh, you
asked for
still,
it.
do you have it?
Yeah, I still have it.
Oh,
I've got
that's
all of
awesome.
those.
That is great. I was going to say you got to find a way to get that out there. Although I imagine probably exactly what they are. I love hearing about like the Sonic or the Mortal Kombat. Because I had a friend too that was like, "Look at this drawing I did a scorpion ripping this dude's head off."
Oh yeah.
I'm like, "Oh man, that's amazing. This is great."
Yep.
It's so interesting that back then, knowing that somebody could draw like some of your favorite characters, it felt like you almost had access to that show. Like, oh, make him do this now. And you're like, oh my God, he's doing that. And in today's day and age, like that's totally going to change. But it was so fun and fascinating back in school.
Well,
So with
nowadays
you doing
you've
all
got
this,
like the fan fiction and the furry community and all
oh
that, where
yeah,
they're like, draw my favorite Disney characters, and well, doing something
yeah,
with it.
being romantic. Yeah, exactly.
Being
I want
romantic.
to see Aladdin and Peter Pan holding hands on the beach in short swim trunks. Yeah, and
Oh,
yeah,
exactly. And
that'll.
I have to admit, I think it was seventh or eighth grade. My friend and I were drawing characters from Aladdin in a gigantic orgy, and we were drawing them in various positions that I should not have known about at 13. But
Yeah.
and then his mom discovered it, and then I was not allowed to hang out with him after that. After that, so we got in trouble for that. No, so yeah, that's
In
not
trouble for
something I'm
the
proud
arts.
about.
That's great. That's great, though. No, that's so fantastic. Well, with you, I was going to ask, with you doing all of the drawing, what was the impetus for film school, or were you doing much with like movies, home movies, acting stuff out? Did you see yourself as more of a director, and maybe the drawing was that kind of just like, hey, I don't have access to a camera or a way to film, so this is a way that I can almost like storyboard or do scenes. Was there anything like that, or was it just
Well,
like this sounds good, but I find myself drawing all day?
Well, I definitely liked the drawing because I could see myself progressing very well, and my goal as a kid was to try to get my skills so I would be able to have things look real. Like if I were going to draw something and copy it, I would want to do a good replication of it. So that was my attempt, to try to. I would copy artists from like Electronic Gaming Monthly or Nintendo Power, and I'd be like trying to figure out how to do what they did. So I definitely had a passion for that. But my buddy Dan, who I met him in fifth grade, and he was another artist. And it was funny because he looked over at my desk and he saw some drawings I had, and he's like, "Wow, this kid can really draw." So he showed me some of his drawings, and then that's how we became friends. But he had a video camera that we learned how to do claymation with, and so we set up his like Sony Handycam, and then we had some clay, and we put it up on the little on his bunk beds or whatever, and we were like moving it, and then hitting play and record, and then stop, and then moving it again and record, and we experimented with video effects and recording, and no editing, just all in camera stuff, silly stuff that we did. But I mean, that was one of my favorite memories. Some of the things that we used to do as kids.
Yeah, for me it was you just reminded me like my dad didn't work for a while, and then when he went back to work, he was working at what was the name of that place? It's basically like a Sears, but working in
Hmm.
the electronics department. Oh, I think it was called Fred Schmidt. Weird name for an electronics store, but anyway, I think they sold appliances and electronics. But he came home one day with this video camera that was huge. I remember the thing like was almost like the size of a carry-on suitcase,
Oh
but
yeah,
it had
those
all
things.
of these built-in effects. And so like he could do all of these little effects in camera, recording and stuff like that. And I remember one of them was, and I'm still kind of wondering what this effect actually was doing or did, but we would say it was the make me disappear effect, where he would start recording, and then you would go and you'd run off camera, but it basically is cutting for you to run off, but it kind of like was able to somewhat seamlessly put it together. It's like, look, you just disappeared. We're sitting there, and then poof, we would go and we're like, oh my God, that's the most amazing thing in the world. And so like that was one of the first times I remember, like, not to say like my dad's not some like abusive hard ass or something like that. It's just more for the lack of my memory. That was one of the first times that I remember like relating with my dad and like having a good time with him and stuff like that. And was over this video camera. And so whether that was the impetus for me to get into film or anything like that, who knows? But I do remember when I went back and we had to start doing our first film projects that was all in-camera edits and stuff like that. I was like, this is exactly what I used to do with my dad. And it was so much fun to be able to do that. And it just felt like this new superpower that you have that as a kid, that it's like, that's what's inspiring, is that you're like, I can do this for real. And oh my God, this is crazy. Like I felt like alien technology had come down. It was great.
And
So did you?
well, when I hear you say that, I imagine you felt more comfortable behind the camera, like you were the one recording it, shooting it, video effects, making the scene happen. And I feel like that's how I was too. I didn't want to be in front of the camera. That's what my friend Dan was for. Dan, you go do the thing. You go climb that tree. I'm gonna record you. We're gonna do this thing. You're gonna fall. I'm gonna make this trap. You're gonna fall into it, and we're gonna like record it in such a way where it's gonna look like you really fell. Fun stuff like that.
Yeah.
So we always made our friends do the acting, and we were behind the camera.
When did you kind of switch over? Was it before college, after college, that film took a little bit of a backseat more to design and drawing and illustration and graphic design?
Yeah, gosh, let me see. Like, so high school, we had the little bit of film stuff that we did with me and my buddies, just video camera stuff. But it wasn't until college. So I went to college for 3D animation, computer animation. Now, I had originally wanted to be a film director. Steven Spielberg was a big inspiration for me. Jurassic Park was a big inspiration for me. So I was like, that's what I wanted to do in fourth and fifth grade: special effects, cinema, movies, or video games. So when I got into college, I was like, well, this sounds like a good way to learn that stuff. And they had a film class in college, but I was still geared to do computer, digital, animated stuff. Or that was my intention at the time. I didn't get so drawing was just kind of a means to an end at that point. And they really coached you on drawing in college. Life drawing, you had to be really good if you're going to animate, 2D animation or 3D. I mean, the people who did 3D modeling and 3D animation were really amazing artists. I mean, we had people that we looked up to that were artists for Disney and for Pixar. And if you wanted to be on their level, you had to be like extremely like proficient at being able to render 3D characters and draw them in any particular pose. It was hard for me. But as far as film goes, we had a filmmaking class, and I didn't get into actual cinema or film until, I guess, maybe midway through my college career, when I discovered the films of Harmony Korine and Werner Herzog, and David Lynch.
Oh, yeah.
So when I saw his films, I was like, oh, I like this. I'm into this kind of weird, fucked up kind of cinema verite, documentary style film. And even though all the people in my class were more into Star Wars or sci-fi or anime, that's what they were into. But I didn't really pursue film much after that. I kind of felt like it required way too much, and I just didn't have access to all of that. It's too much of a big project.
Yeah, interesting. Well, and it was kind of funny. Not that I took the trajectory of drawing, but when I was in film school, I enjoyed my drawing classes more than I enjoyed my film classes. And it made me realize is that I was like, I didn't lose my passion for film. I just kind of lost my passion for the way that they were teaching it. I think I was at the point as well where I was and I think throughout my entire career, which kind of brings it back a little bit as well, where I always I wanted somebody, which is almost, again, the impetus for this podcast. I just wanted to be able to ask my question and get it answered. Like, okay, how do you make a movie? Like, as ignorant as that sounds, that was kind of a question for me, like going into film school. So, you can talk to me, we can analyze, John Woo, and, the Doves and all of this stuff, or these independent movies and how they're using shadows to convey the emotion, the mise en scène, all of this stuff, these ridiculous terms that you're throwing out, but it still never really answered the question for me. How do you make a movie? How,
Right.
where's the job application for filmmaker? Because it was things like that where I was like, I just want to ask somebody and then have you answer that question
Hmm.
for me. And so when I left, and I think that was another reason why getting into the arts was odd for me, is that I remember very much debating, am I going to go to culinary school or am I going to go to film school? But I also kind of realized one of the only reasons I wanted to pursue culinary school was because I loved these cooking shows so much. And don't get me wrong, I love cooking, but I was
Hmm.
like, oh, well, what if I could make a cooking show? That
Okay.
would
Yeah.
be pretty cool. And so I was like, that would be fun. That would scratch that itch for me, being around those chefs. But I also remember thinking there again that I was like, I think in my head, the bubble was popped as soon as I got to film school. Is that I was like, if you go to film school, when you finish, you're a film director and you go work on Star Wars. That's just how that works. And so same, if I go to culinary school, you train me and I'm a chef, and now I work in this restaurant and I'm a chef. And that's just,
Hmm.
I didn't know any better. And I didn't even necessarily know to ask the question was the other thing, is that I didn't get until I got older and started having some mentors that I was like, oh, I can just ask you this. But it was always just such a mystery for me. So when you're getting started off, did you have an end goal in mind? Like if you're in high school, it was to be Steven Spielberg. You wanted to go to film school, learn how to be a director, and then come out and you're Steven Spielberg. Is that kind of how you imagined it was going to go for you, or did you see a little bit of a different path?
Yeah, when I went, I had this intention that, all right, I'm an artist. I'm going to work in video games or movies. Somehow, I'm going to go to college and then I'm going to get a job doing this. But what you don't realize, or what I realized when I was in college, is that like the jobs that you do get are going to be like, you're a texture map person. You're just doing this like texture on these other people's designs, or you're an in-between artist working with the animators. You're just drawing the same things. You're not really doing any important work. You're just doing like the scratch work, or you're going to get paid nothing to do like grunt level intern shit at like a some studio. I mean, it was definitely kind of a realization where everybody in my school wanted to work at Pixar or something like that. So it was like there's only going to be
Sure.
one or two kids that even have a chance at that anyway, and everyone else is going to end up working somewhere in a weird industry. They're going to end up working at Kinko's or well FedEx office now, but
Yeah. Uh huh.
or they're going to work at like a place like that where their knowledge of Photoshop is kind of just like helping people make copies or something, and so or working at like a local news station doing TV graphics or chyrons and stuff like that for the bottom of the screen.
Yeah.
Like I interned at Fox Sports while I was in college, and I was cutting together women's basketball highlights, and I mean that was actually a really interesting experience, but I mean, it was not really enjoyable. It was fun. I liked watching the basketball games more than anything. I was like, this is cool. Actually, it was what got me into women's basketball. But
You and I had a similar path then working at I worked at a TV station. I was clipping together highlights from sports, and obviously the ones I liked the best were the hockey ones. But I think we
mhm.
did hockey, baseball, and there was a few other things. We got to work on some weird things. But I was at least fortunate enough. I had a really good producer that started letting me write my own spots. So when we were doing promos for like the next game, he'd be like, all right, go get a couple highlights. We got a 15-second interstitial that we need to promote the game with and
Mhm.
all of that. And so that was like the first time I ever got to write anything. And so I was like writing a commercial, and that was like unbelievable to me. And still is like now one of, the type of videos that I like to make is much more short form. Like news I thought was too fast. When I worked in news, I didn't like how fast it was when it was like here today, gone 5 minutes later. And everything was such a rush, like, oh, get this done right away, right away,
It
right
was.
away. It was like you had no time to sink your teeth in. And then I was like, you know what? In all honesty, I don't know if I can work on a movie. I don't know if I have the stamina to have one project for 3 to 5 years. Like that might be too much. I'm gonna get bored way too fast. I was like, how about, like 3 weeks to 3 months? Projects right in there is what kind of spoke to me the most. But so when you were doing, I mean, this was early 90s for animation in 3D. Like, so Toy Story had barely just come out, I would guess.
Yes.
I
Well,
mean, I think Toy
I went to
Story
school in
was 95,
2000. So
96. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So Toy Story pretty much just came out. Yeah. I was class of 2000 in high school. And yeah, so college till 2004.
Gotcha. So, I mean, because 3D was brand new still back then. Like,
Very brand
I
new.
mean,
Yeah, yeah. So the stuff we were making looked like shit.
yeah. What
And it's still
program were
very
you in then?
3D Studio Max and Maya.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Now, Maya was the advanced program that everybody was supposed to learn. I got pretty decent at 3D Studio Max, and I've got an interesting story about that, where a cold hard realization of what happens after the industry. So, like, I was after I graduated, I'm trying to find a job, and I find this like production company in Ohio where I grew up, and they make 3D animated additions to films that already exist. So it's like they had a movie like Spy Kids or something like that, and then they would like add extra 3D elements to the film, and I don't know where they would produce it or post it, but it was like they took their own CG elements and added like a UFO in there or something like I don't know what they were doing, but anyway, the guy running it, so he interviewed me, and my interview process was like fine with him, but I had to do free work for him. So like I had to do a storyboard to test he wanted to test my skills. So I storyboarded the first first 10 pages of his screenplay for some movie that he was writing, and I was like trying really hard. I was like I got to impress him, so I like spent weeks doing this, or a week or two doing this storyboard. He also wanted me to learn Lightwave, which was a 3D software at the
Yeah.
time that I didn't
Yep.
know, but he said that the industry uses Lightwave. So if you want to get a career, you have to learn Lightwave. So he handed me a cracked copy of Lightwave for like Windows 98. And I was
Oh,
like,
really?
okay.
That's
I'm like,
great.
this doesn't even work on my computer. And so he's like, well, and so he gave me another one that actually did work. And so I'm sitting there trying to like learn Lightwave. And the whole time that I'm doing this, I'm doing a storyboard and trying to learn Lightwave. I just had this like awful feeling about me that like, I hate this. I hate doing this for him, but I have to do it if I want to get a job. And so like I was procrastinating. I couldn't really do it, and I showed him the storyboard, and he wanted color, so I had to go back to the drawing board and start coloring some of the stuff. And he was like, "Okay," but he would call me and he'd be like, "How's your progress on Lightwave?" And I said, "I haven't really been learning it." And in fact, I got a freelance project for my one of my friend's gaming stores. He went to school for business, opened up a hobby shop, and so he wanted to have me design a logo for him. So that was my first freelance project. But anyway, I'm drawing that, and I'm excited about that, and I model his character in 3D and everything like that in 3D Studio Max. I end up telling this guy, and he ends up chewing me out on the phone. He's like, why are you doing that? Like, why are you using 3D Studio Max? He's like, you want to use Lightwave? Fuck 3D Studio Max. Fuck your future. If this is what you think you're gonna do, you've got no chance. And he just was like reaming me out, like, and he had no way, like, how could he do that to somebody? But like, I kind of felt like I deserved it in a weird way. I'm like, I'm sorry, I was apologetic, and I was at
You're
the end of
trying
it,
to
I was
help
like,
me.
I'm like,
Yeah.
fuck this shit, like. And I
It's
saw at his office too that like some of the employees had to wear like a suit and tie to like work, and it just was dark and
uh
dingy in there, and I was like, this is not where I want to be. I mean, it was horrible.
there was so many weird video jobs and shops and odd ends. Like, I mean, I even remember I had friends out of film school that went to those like work at those videotape to DVD conversion
Oh
places.
yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
like you used to see around. That was hilarious. And I remember thinking like, that guy's really doing it. He's got his own shop and, making all this money, making DVDs. What great. Like, I remember thinking that for a little bit. And then like a year later, I'm like, dude, what are you talking about? This is probably the worst job ever. The guy's going to be gone in 6 months. And sure enough, shop's gone and all that. But I do
Hmm.
find it interesting. I won't get too much into it now because I feel like we could go on for hours. The elitism back in the day, I feel like it's finally starting to go a little away a little bit. The elitism back in the day between 3D programs and how
Oh
much
yeah.
people would like stick their nose up at people that were using different 3D programs. And Lightwave, that's funny. And now Lightwave's pretty much done, and 3D Studio Max is still around, which is
Right.
hilarious. And all of that. That is just like, oh man. I had a similar thing one time on a professional project. I didn't know, I'm not a character animator by any means, but my early days, I was doing 3D motion design. That was kind of my first where I was like, you're getting pretty good at this. You know this pretty well. You like this pretty good. It was one of my bigger footholds in the industry early on was 3D animation and motion graphics. But I'm not a character animator, not by any means. Don't want
Right.
to. I would love to know it, but I know the amount of effort that it would take to do that, and I do not have that time or energy. I really respect those guys. So we had a project
Hmm.
though where we wanted an animated character and we wanted it in 3D. And I was like, well, if I've got somebody that's rigged the whole thing and built it out and textured it and done everything on this model, I can probably make some minor tweaks along the way. I can see what they did and I can tweak it. I don't have the money. This was for a company. I was like, we don't have the money to keep paying you every single time we need something new. So how about you make this, rig it, do the first animation, then we'll take it over from there. And so I knew Cinema 4D at the time. And there was not a lot of shops that were doing character animation in Cinema 4D. So we finally find one and we're like, oh, you guys do Cinema 4D with characters? And they're like, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. And I'm like, oh, okay, great. And I'm working for like a Fortune 120 company at the time. So they're very excited to be talking with us. Big corporate money at that point. And so we're like, yeah, could you build sound? They're like, oh, yeah, of course. Come up on they're like, we'll get the designers on here. Or they're like, let's get everybody on and let's chat about this. And the first call was basically them saying how stupid Cinema 4D is, how we shouldn't use it. Anybody that uses Cinema 4D is a hack, doesn't know what they're doing. And if you want to be a professional, you do it in Maya and only Maya, and we're not going to do it in Cinema 4D or anything. And I was like, well, I'm the paying client, so up yours later. And never worked with them. It was like the worst attitude that they were like, look, they're like, that's, they were like, that's cute that you use Cinema 4D. They're like, we use Maya. You know, you have to have like a 4-year degree to use Maya, right? Not just, you can't just pick it up and do it.
Okay.
And I'm like, I fail to see why that changes the fact that I need this in Cinema 4D.
Yeah, the
And
elitism.
it was like, you guys can't produce it. It was so weird. Everybody was so elite about their program. It
Mhm.
was 3D Studio Max, Maya, Cinema 4D, and Lightwave. Yeah, so weird.
Yeah, and Maya
So
seemed to
fun.
have a lot of clout. 3D Studio Max, not so
Yeah.
much. And Lightwave, I mean, I have no idea where nobody taught. No, nobody even mentioned Lightwave in my school.
Yeah, I saw Lightwave. I don't know if I'd have to look up, but maybe their render engine spun off on something else. But it always
Probably.
seemed like with Lightwave, I saw really realistic models coming out of it. Like, oh my God, that looks so realistic. And things like that, that their renderer might have been really, really good. And maybe that went to the wayside. Like, I don't know if that's where
Mhm.
Redshift came from or not. But I remember thinking that it looked really, really good, but I never really saw any video out of Lightwave. I remember I always just saw a bunch of stills and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So did you mess around in high school at all with any 3D animation, or were you just like, did you show up day one and like, I don't know crap about 3D. Hopefully you guys can all teach me and I'm just going to learn it on the fly.
My first introduction to 3D was a program called Bryce. Have you
Oh
heard
yeah,
of
yeah, I
that?
remember Bryce. Uh-huh. Yep.
Bryce 3D, and it was like pre-made 3D objects, like landscapes. Like you can generate a mountain or water and texture it and stuff. It was kind of like entry level stuff, and I was able to render 3D scenes for the very first time. I thought it was outstanding and fantastic. And at that point, Photoshop started introducing some like weird 3D. Not, I wouldn't say 3D because they didn't introduce real 3D until much later. But like I was using Photoshop for the very first time in my senior year of high school, and I was able to create like the illusion of 3D, and add some stuff together, like with different textures and effects, and I put that in the
Sure.
digital arts. I put it in the digital arts, the county fair in their digital arts category, and I ended up winning first place with
Oh,
a
okay.
Photoshop design. Um, but no, I didn't know a little. I knew a little bit about it, and then when I went to school and learned 3D Studio Max for the first time, that was like where I really got into the nuts and bolts of it.
So did you change at all that did you still want to be Spielberg at that time, or were you much more like, I want to go work on the next Toy Story type of a
Yeah,
thing?
I think I wanted to make video games, honestly, because when
Oh, video games. Yeah, yeah.
all of my art school, all of my art styles was video game influenced. I was a big fan of Mortal Kombat and like Final Fantasy, and I really wanted to make games like that and draw cool pictures. But the when I went to art school, I realized I wasn't as much of a gamer as everybody else was. I was like way less nerdy than other people. I mean, I say that like not to disparage anybody, but
Sure.
these people are much more dedicated to the craft of like making cartoons for a living, and I just felt like I wasn't into it. They loved voice acting, they loved character design, and they were much more committed. So I realized I was like out of my depths there. And same thing with the film stuff. I didn't want to be Steven Spielberg at that point. I started to get inspired by music videos. There's artists like Aphex Twin and Chris Cunningham. He had this "Come to Daddy" music video for Aphex Twin, and that was one of the things that really inspired me. I just loved the editing in that thing. If you're familiar with Aphex Twin's music, it's kind of like noisy and erratic electronic music. It's all over the place, but the video for it is like edited to like the minute like 30-second notes of the like the drums and the hi-hats, and it was like incredible. Like, so him and Spike Jonze were other artists, and there's a
Oh,
like a
Spike
DVD
Jones for
series.
sure.
Yeah, Spike Jonze, and there's Michelle Gondry was another
Oh yeah,
filmmaker slash music video
totally.
director, and I really liked
Yeah.
their style. And so that's when I started to get really into this idea that I wanted to make music videos, and I was starting to get into punk rock and emo music at the time, and I was also getting into breakdancing and b-boying. And so I really liked that gritty underground culture. And so that started to steer me a little bit more away from 3D animation. Now, I will say that my filmmaking project in my filmmaking class, well, no, actually two. I had two. I had a filmmaking class. I made a short film, and we can get into that in a minute. But my final thesis project was a music video that featured a 3D animated b-boy. So I got
Oh
to
wow,
blend
that'd be
my
tough.
animation, blend my b-boy and my music that I started learning how to create. That's when I first started producing electronic music, was in like 2001. So I was in college, and so we would break dance together, and then so I got into b-boying and learning how to break dance moves, and then so it would be a cool project if I can learn how to design, rig, and animate a b-boy and put that into my composite it into an actual video that we shot. So that was a big challenge, but
Yeah.
it was one of the funnest projects I ever worked on.
That would be incredibly difficult. I mean, even now, that's a tough project. Like I said, I still admire character animation. It still feels like magic to me. I think everybody feels like it's so easy and it's so difficult. It's so hard to
Especially
get
without
character
motion
animation.
capture.
Yes, exact, especially without motion capture. I mean, and it's kind of funny now, even with motion capture, you still have to touch it a little bit and it still looks a little bit off. Like you still play some of these video games and you still can tell that's not a that's not a real person. I can tell by the way that they're moving. Like there's still a little bit of that character animation. Oh man, it's that would be cool. Well, and it's funny that you talked about music video. I think if I had a dream job, it would be making music videos in the 90s.
Oh
Like
yeah.
that's what I would want to do. Like I was definitely of the MTV generation, staying up when they still played
Hmm.
music videos, staying up till midnight, just watching. And I remember seeing music videos for the first time. Like I remember when I saw Eminem's first music video, and I was like, "Who is this guy?" It was like 11:45 at night or something like that. I'm like, "Who is this guy?" And it was just so weird and different. But then, you have so many different styles out there, and I was always so attracted to all of that. And then you've got like the Jamiroquai videos and stuff like that. And oh, there was how did I forget the name of the band? Very famous. You want it all, but you can't have it. I think it's called. What is it?
I
It
can't
was one of
remember
the
lyrics.
greatest music videos. It was just this dude with long hair and like weird stuff's happening all around him. I'm gonna
Hmm.
search it up here. Music video. But it was one of my favorites out there, and it wasn't necessarily one of my favorite songs, and that's what made me think about that. Is that I was like, the song is fine, the song is great, but I loved watching the video, is that I was like, oh, these are kind of two different things. And even like seeing Billy Idol and stuff like that in some of his music videos, contrasted with much more of like a Beastie Boys style video or something like that, and all of the different genre of all of that. I was like, I still want to go do music videos if there was a decent amount of money to be made in it. You know, if you're doing videos for Nine Inch Nails or something, then maybe you can, or you're Spike Jones, you can make some money at it. But you know, otherwise, it's unfortunately gone the way of a lot of other video. There's no money left in it
Yeah.
to do, which is too bad. But no, oh gosh, that was like my era. I would stay up, I would watch music videos and cooking shows, which is hilarious. I'm watching like Emerald Lagasse and Bobby Flay, and then I'm watching, you know, like Britney Spears music videos and stuff like that. Like so weird, such a weird contrast.
Yeah.
No, no. So I was going to say, as we start to wrap it up here, when you were just starting off, did you then at that point still in college, just to kind of go back to full circle before we get to our inspirations, did you have any mentors then in college? Was it very similar to high school with people like, hey Jeff, when you like did you feel like they were preparing you pretty well for, hey, here's the real world, here's how it works, here's what you're going to need to do. You had some mentors that you could kind of bounce off of that you felt comfortable with?
You know, not really. I got to say it was
Yeah.
kind of the opposite because I went to the Art Institute of Pittsburgh, and if anybody knows, the Art Institutes have like closed down in the past 10 years. Like
Yeah.
they were in some scandal for like fraud dealing, you know, admissions fraud, something weird like that. But they don't even exist anymore. But they were never
My art
considered like
school
a top of
closed
the
as
line.
well.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So
Yeah.
art institutes were all over the country, you know, and I went to the one in Pittsburgh, but they were never really known to be like a tier one art school. Like it's not like RISD or Savannah College of Art and Design or any of these other
Sure.
places. So, but they did teach you like video game entry level like stuff to do, and they definitely prepared you to get a job in that market. So I think they were trying to coach you in that direction, as flawed as they may be. But I had some teachers that actually de-inspired me because the way they made the industry out to be, and then the impression that you had to be so committed and you had to be like you couldn't have any other interest outside of the work. This one teacher, I don't know if she still works there. Her name's Angela Love. She was one of the hardest teachers that I had there, and actually is. You know how they have like teachers in the beginning that try to weed out all the people that aren't committed because they're so incredibly
Oh, I
difficult and kind of mean?
exactly what you heard.
So she was
Yes.
very difficult, mean, and strict, and she just would like rip people's art to shreds if you sucked. And she tried to train the anime habit out of kids because so many kids went in there learning how to draw like anime, and they all draw the same. So she's like
Yeah. I can
trying to
well
cut
see.
that out. And anyway, she's the one that told me. I remember asking her. I said, "So if you get a job in this field, can you like have a family and stuff?" Like, because I had a girlfriend at the time, and I thought, you know, I was imagining myself as having a family, building something with her. Of course, that didn't work out, but you know,
Sure.
she said, no, absolutely not. And she's like, said it matter of factly, like, if you want to work in this industry, if you want any success, you're going to need to be doing 12 to 16-hour days and working your fucking ass off to get anywhere near. And I was like, "Ugh, that sounds awful to me. I don't want to do that, you know?" And so that combined with like the seeing everybody else and how awesome or how interested in the cartoons they were, I'm just like, I don't even like this stuff. Like, I don't care. I don't watch anime. I'm not into cartoons. I'm not into 3D animation at all anyway. I want to make music videos for like metal and punk bands. I want to do that, and I want to do their posters and do their illustrations and t-shirt designs. We can talk about that in the next episode, is that how I transitioned away from animation to graphic design and illustration. But yeah, the teachers didn't really help so much. They were kind of like competing with the kids. Some of the teachers were dating the kids. I mean, it was just
Oh,
silly.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's. I had a I had a somewhat similar experience where it was like I sat down. I remember day one of film school. It was Film 101, and the
Hmm.
teacher. It was kind of a big lecture class, and it was mostly film study and stuff like that. And you could say film appreciation or something, whatever you want to call it. But she sat down there, and it had the most students in it of all of the film classes. She sat down, and the first thing she said was, 50% of you people will not pass this class. And I'm like, sounds like you're a horrible teacher then. Like, you can only get half of your class to pass this? Like, you must really suck at this. And like, that was, I was like, that's a really weird thing to say. And, but that was, I easily made that like leap there that I was like, I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to say, hey, you need to work hard. You need to take this seriously. If you don't, you're going to be out of here. Like, that's what you're
Right.
trying to do. But I was like, really, what is resonating with me is that you must really suck as a teacher. Then, if only 50% of your class passes, like, God, you must be terrible.
Yeah, and this is
I'm not going to
after
learn
you've already
anything.
paid your tuition.
Yeah, I'm
After
like,
you've already
great,
paid to
thanks.
get in there.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I was like, you kind of need to go the other way around, and yeah, and so then my film school as well. It wasn't a part of Art Institute. I went to this place called the College of Santa Fe, and
Okay.
they had film set. They had like mini studios there. They had some big productions that came through. Like when I was there, I think they had just finished with like some students worked on Wild Wild West. That kind of crappy Western movie with Will Smith.
Will Smith.
There was a movie, a more indie style movie with Penelope Cruz and Matt Damon called All the Pretty Horses. And then they shot some scenes there and they donated the set. And so it was actually a really, the reason I went there was because you could get your hands on equipment as a freshman. And so I was like, oh, I can go and shoot stuff. I can go work on a movie. And there were some pretty big student films there that guys were doing. And I was like, oh, this is good. I can go, be on a set, see what this is like. And that's ultimately one of the big reasons why I went there. I mean, the other one was my best friend was going there. So that helped as well. But it
Yeah.
actually was a good film school. But they did not know how to run their financials, and now they're out of business. And again, scandalous. Where it's like, I mean, I think I told you guys last week that I think I decided to go to school there a week before school started, and they're like, well, I mean, the film program's full, but yeah, whatever, we'll
Yeah.
just throw you in there. And I'm like, well, that was easy. Like, didn't have to say anything, didn't have to apply, just okay, take him. And I was like, everybody else went through this horrible process. And they're like, wait, you just got in? You just said you wanted to join? And I was like, yeah, you didn't? And they're like, no. I had to like interview for this and do all of this. And I was like, oh, yeah, I just said I want to go to film school. And they're like, all right, there you go. And let me in. And then they're like, all right, here's your
Wow.
room. And I was like, how did any of this? It was such a mess. But yeah, she was like, as soon as I took this class, I was like, I got to get out of here. I just remember thinking like I don't know what I'm doing, and so obviously your mind kind of goes back and forth, and oh, I need to do this, I need to study hard. But then in retrospect, I'm like, I knew from the beginning that she was just a fraud. She would like make up terms and then test us on it. She was like, I invented this term, and I'm like, oh, so I'm going to get out to the set. Nobody has any clue what I'm talking about. Perfect. Glad you're testing me on that. Like, I don't know where they found some of these people, but now in retrospect, I think a lot of times in the creative arts, unfortunately, but especially filmmaking, maybe aside from like an NYU or a USC stuff like that, is that if you can make it in filmmaking, you're filmmaking. You're Steven Spielberg, you're George Lucas, you're all of these guys, you're Milos Forman, you're all, Werner Herzog, you're those guys, you're making movies. You're not like, I'm not going to go sit around and teach. Like, no, I'd like to make my films. They don't offer, like what they do for science, for scientists, where it's like, hey, if you come to our school and teach, we'll fund your research. No school is funding a director's movie or anything like that. So you can't get like a Spielberg in house or anything like that. So it really turned me off to the whole program as well, especially for film. It was such a joke. Anyway, with
Yeah.
that being said,
Well, I got
as
one
we
thing.
wrap
I
things,
got
oh
something
yeah,
to
yeah,
add there for you, Zach. Yeah. So you know
yeah.
that guy that I told you about that freaked out on me for using 3D Studio Max, and
Oh yeah, yeah. I
he
love
turned
this
me
guy.
off from like the whole thing. Well, I ended up finding out years later that there were forums and people were talking about their terrible experience working at his company, and then somebody wrote that that guy ended up dying in a nightclub accident like several years later. So yeah, and
What's
people
a
were like,
nightclub next?
I guess he was at a nightclub and maybe he probably OD'd or had a heart attack or something, but he died
Wow.
in the
Oh
nightclub.
yeah. Sounds like a nightclub
And people
accident.
were like, "Yeah, poetic justice or whatever." Like they hated this guy, and I'm like,
So
"Good thing he
I'm
wasn't my
curious.
boss."
What was his business model? How was he making money? Like he's just adding 3D objects to existing content and stuff? Like were
Yeah, I
people
guess these
commissioning him or?
I think people were commissioning him, and I don't know if it had any ties to the films that he, like official ties to the films that he was adding stuff to. He might have, but I didn't really know his business model. I don't know how he was making money. He had a studio. He rented a space in Youngstown, Ohio, um, and they did this stuff. He had some people on his staff, but they did not look happy. They seemed just like, miserable working at their computers.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is gross. I don't want to do this. But see, now all this stuff, it's giving me it's showing me the contrast of what I do not want, and it's going to propel me to be like, fuck that. I'm going to do it my way. And that's the thing that sparks this whole podcast is we should be working. Get a real job. Do Lightwave. That's your career. He was like telling me, he's like, fuck 3D Studio Max. You think that's your career? You're fucked up. He's like trying to convince me that I'm the problem. And I'm like, this like gaslighting, this cognitive dissonance. It's like, what is he doing? I don't know what I want to do. I'm going to do it my way. So it's like, in a way, I kind of thank him for not letting me get in there, but was able to go do it my way, and the rest is history. But
Yeah, it really reminds me of, and I was kind of thinking about this on the episode as we've been chatting, that I was like, we could really, and maybe even should, would be, because we are at such a weird time with the creative arts with AI
yeah,
and where we're at. To me, it makes me think in retrospect that a lot of these people almost saw that their industry was changing in a way, that they see it as dying, that they're like, oh, I've got to hang on to these old ways. Here's how you do it. You have to do it this way. This is how I did it. That's how it goes. Because, I mean, back in the day, a lot of those video jobs, you had a mentor. I mean, even like if you're an Avid editor, the way you get that job is you apprentice with a guy that knows Avid. He's going to show you how to use it. It's this big whole contraption of like, this ridiculous keyboard and all this and prompts. It's like, don't get me wrong, it's a powerful NLE, it's a powerful editor, but it's also ridiculous. And I think more and more, even as time goes on, we've proven that Avid is not necessarily what you need to use. Like there's better, easier solutions out there, but those guys really held on to that. Like, here's how you do this. You have to apprentice. You do it this way, and that's how you make it in the business. Like, well, the world has changed. That's not how it happens anymore. You can do it another way, or why can't I just learn this on my own? Why do I have to, like, you're annoying, smelly, it sound like crap. I hate you. Why do I have to sit with you to learn how to do this dumb thing?
yeah,
Let me figure it out on my own. But then you have them turning you off to this industry. So it's like, I'm really curious if, as we morph and as we move forward with creative arts and AI and all that, if there's going to be a lot of that as well, because in some ways I can almost feel that in myself, where I'm like, you can't have a AI do that for you. Like, it's cooler if I do it. It's like, I don't know, is it really? No, like they're getting
yeah,
exactly what they want. And I think that it's going to be a fun discussion to figure out how we navigate all of that. But I feel in some ways it makes me wonder if those guys, if that's kind of what they were like, is that they're like, these hotshot kids come in here and think they know everything. I'll teach them.
yeah,
They're not going to take away my livelihood. And like, no,
yeah,
100% they are. They're going to
yeah,
if you're not careful.
yeah. And I don't know why they got to be so mean about it. It's like,
Oh, absolutely. Like,
what's
just
the
help me
problem?
out here. Just go. Yeah, if you want to, great. If not, go over there. But let's work on this. Here's what I think, and you want to go that way. Let's make it work for you. Yeah, it's weird. So inspiration wise, anything for you? Any music, movies, TV that's been inspiring for you?
Well, I've been kind of in this rabbit hole this week with this Amazon Prime documentary called "Shiny Happy People." It's
Ooh,
about I don't know. There used to be a reality show called 19 Kids and Counting with the Duggar family. I don't know if you're
yeah,
familiar
yeah.
with it on TLC or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
But they were like a Christian fundamentalist family with tons of kids, and they had a reality show about them. But this show on Amazon Prime kind of gets into like what was all behind it and the sort of fuckery that was afoot and the abuse and what they weren't all shiny happy people, and they were like inspired by this branch of Christian fundamental homeschool teaching called the International or the Institute for Basic Life Principles, and it was like a Christian cult that I wouldn't call it a
Oh,
cult.
wait,
It maybe had cult mentality, but what's that?
is it the Duggar family specifically that
It's the
it's kind
Duggar
of
family.
talking about? Or-
Yes, it's
Yeah.
talking about them specifically, but where they get their
Oh,
influence and what they were involved with was this thing called the Institute of Basic Life Principles, which, funnily enough, it basically taught you the homeschool curriculum and how to raise your kids to be like, you know, good Christians and then go promote go change the world for Jesus, But it was so patriarchal and it was so the way that they treated women and everything. It's just extraordinary to watch. I've been fascinated with that.
no, that's I love those behind the veils. I mean, especially of reality TV. God, the way that they can spin things or did, and we're only just now beginning to realize how much of it is produced.
Hmm.
But I'm not surprised by that one little bit. It's like, doesn't this feel really off and nobody else is like that? Yeah, that's why we're making a TV show about it. 'Cause it's so weird and I'm like, oh yeah, I knew that there was something else going on.
Yeah,
I
and
knew that.
it hits close to home because I was raised in a strong Christian, household that had a lot of Baptist teaching, fire and brimstone, fear of hell methodologies. Not as much as my
Hmm.
grandparents, but like my parents had some of that, and so I'm like wondering if they got some of their teachings from this because this place was so influential, and all in the '90s, a lot of families kind of that's who they looked for, and where purity culture started. This wait for marriage to have sex, and that's kind of like how I
Yeah,
was raised and what I intended to do when I was young. So it's good to
me as
watch it
well.
now as I'm like deconstructing my spirituality and religion and patriarchy and all this kind of stuff. So
Really,
yeah, what
is
about
it
you?
for me? Let's see. What have I been watching? So I've been watching. I just finished the show Mr. and Mrs. Smith, Donald Glover's new
Okay.
show, which
Hmm.
I love him and I love his style. And I still think Atlanta, if nobody's ever watched it, go watch Atlanta because it's really different than anything that you've ever seen. And it's such an interesting voice and a change of pace from normal series television that we're kind of evolving into with this newest generation. And for me, in a lot of ways, he's leading that way. And I mean, I just remember watching it for a few episodes and I'm like, I don't know if I get it. I don't know if I get it. I don't, where is this going? It's just very untraditional of how the show flows and develops and all of that. And then takes weird side beats where, normally in TV they would call him a filler episode. And instead of doing a filler episode, he's like, let's just do a weird episode that has almost nothing to do with anything, but we're going to have all the same characters in there, and then next week we're just gonna act like none of that ever happened. It's really fascinating with how he put that show together, and so there's a similar style with this Mr. and Mrs. Smith that you put out. You can tell that Donald Glover and some of his people worked on it, just with the way that it flows, the way that it's shot, the type of vibe is great. It is not a it's not a spy show though. So even though they play these spies in the show, it's much more of a relationship show. The relationship between man and woman, husband, wife, all of that, being intimate with somebody. What is a relationship? What is not? What constitutes that? And that part's okay. I mean, it gets a little bit predictable in that regard as far as what you expect to see
Hmm.
in a Hollywood type piece, but it's good. I mean, just for me, I could almost as Dana Carvey says a lot of the time, he says funny with the sound off. It's a show that you could mute it, and I think I could still watch it and be interested in it just because it's shot so well and acted so well that I think it's even good with the sound off. But yeah, it's a fun show. And then that being said, too, some of the other stuff that I'm watching is more just fun. Where I get caught up in this sometimes, where I start, if you want to argue the Star Wars sequels about them being good, I will argue with you all day long about how they're not, and how I hate them and how they've ruined my childhood and all of this, and they've taken it a horrible direction. And then people will come up like, well, I just sit back and I enjoy it. It's just a fun movie to watch. I don't need to get caught up in all of the history or all of this. I can just sit and watch it. While I agree with that, a lot of the time, other times I don't. But I'm watching some other shows where I'm like, look, I get it. They're kind of this, they're kind of that, but it's just kind of fun to watch. I started watching this new show called House of Ninjas. And it's about this family that are like these old school ninjas, and it's all in Japanese. And so I'm watching it dubbed, and it's just kind of fun. They get a little deep in the story, but it's like, oh, it's this family that's, trying to figure stuff out, but they're also ninjas as well. And do they want to dive back into the world of being ninjas, and, helping the government? But, a new evil is rising. So you're like, it sounds like a really corny sitcom. And in some ways it is, but I'm like, it's just fun. These guys are just out there having a little bit of fun, and it speaks to that little kid in me where I was like, oh, ninjas, and oh, this is great, and
Right.
some of the old school ideas with new school techniques is what I've been liking about it. So it's like if I just want to sit back and just like relax, do that, and then that's those have been my bigger inspirations. But then also another big inspiration, again, the point of the show is should be working, is not having a job anymore. Then I'm like, better get inspired quick. Need to, it's almost like that panic is setting in again. Like, hey, where's your money coming from? But then also trying to think like what you and I talk about is where is my source of inspiration? And so maybe if I go work on some of these 5-second projects, I can revitalize some of that hasn't been there. And where is that drive when I'm 21 years old? So I'm just like, in some ways I'm pushing myself again where I'm like, go push, 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 push
Right.
I'm trying to find that inspiration as well. It's like, what do I want to do that can generate me money? And how do I want to do that? Because am I going to go back to cold calling people and hitting them up so I can get some cash? Which, because freelance, while I've had it and it's always there in the back pocket a little bit, it's pretty dry right now. And so it's like I'm gonna have to put some work and effort if I want to get my freelance biz back up again. And so do I want to do that? Where am I inspired? And so it's also weird that you have inspiration with panic. And that's not a good way to be inspired, to be like, I better be inspired any second now, any second now. You better go find it. You better go seek it. What do you love? What do you love to do? Go make some money. Go do this. But it's all being pushed by, you got to go make money, got to go make money. And so
Yeah.
it's a weird place it's hard to find inspiration in that place. So if you have any
Yeah.
ideas, please let me know.
Well, yeah. Anyone listening to this, if you've got any ideas, let us know. You know, yeah, because you've got inspiration. The way that you talked about coaching your son's hockey team, and the kids there, and it sounds like it brings you a lot of joy. And it's things aren't the same when you're trying to go find a job and you've got skills and you're trying to be inspired, but you have to do this. It's like that doesn't sound very fun at all. And it wasn't how you were when you first started in the industry, where you're filled with hope and optimism, and you were a steal for some company to hire you when you were 20 years old. Now you're like, in your 40s, and you're just like, nobody who wants to hire you. But
Yeah.
for you're fresh off of a career, like, so you've just got out. It's easier probably for you to stay in that groove and get back into one. I personally am having a hard time because I've been out of it for 5 to 10 years, and so it's like, do I have to go back into that? Where do I fit? I don't know if I want to do that. I feel pressure to do it. It's one of the whole big reasons we're doing this podcast. Um,
It is a
how do we follow
weird
our hearts
contrast.
when? Yes, exactly.
Yeah. It is weird because I will say that, and even as I was listening to last week's episode, where I'm like, I am still proud of, working hard and like what we were talking about last week, where, we were instilled with these values of put in a hard day's work, do that. And there is a part of me that's very proud of that, where I'm like, I did put in a lot of work. I was able to provide for my family, and I did do all this, and I buckled down and did the grind. And then it's also then a weird contrast when you think about I'm proud of working something that I didn't like doing. That's something to be proud of. Like I guess it is, and we as a society can go like, man, Jeff, I'm really proud of you. You didn't, you know, that was something that you didn't want to do, but you buckled down and you did it for somebody else. Yes, that's admirable. So it's like if you look at Zach, hey, you did this for your family. You did it. You buckled down and you did this thing to help somebody else out that you didn't want to do. At the same time, it's really weird because you do need to be a little bit selfish in there. So as you're seeing this new world or trying to come back into it, it's terrifying as well to be like, I don't really know who I am at this. And do I want to go back to that? And even how do I go back into it? Because I'm even thinking that now after a few, after a very little time, I'm like, I don't even know if the game is the same to go back in. And how do I get into all that? And what are people looking for? And what is a good resume? And all that. And do I even want to make a resume? And, what is a good interview? And you hear so many different compare and contrast. Oh, this is a great story for us to end on, which was, again, some of our overlap. So when the way that I discovered Go Media and you was from a friend. So it was, I think, 2006, 2007. I was living out here in Colorado, and my girlfriend, now wife, was like, hey, all my family's in Ohio. We've got a good thing going here, but I'll be honest, like I'm moving to Ohio. If you want to be a part of that, great. If not, we should probably just part ways now. No harm, no foul. Let's just end it and call it what it was. And I was like, oh no, I'm a single guy. I've got nothing tying me down here. Like my career's no big deal, anything like that. I'll go with you out to Ohio. And I was working with this guy that was a graphic designer. He's like, well, if you're out there, he goes, probably the best guys doing it are the guys at Go Media. And he goes, you should look them up while you're out there. And I was like, oh, let me take a look. And I was like, holy shit, these guys are amazing. I was like, oh, I love this. And, not to blow too much steam up your skirt unnecessarily, but the punk rock vibe really did come through. I felt in those early days, like it felt like nobody else is doing it. Nobody else is doing it this way. This is really cool. These are guys that I could work with and hang out with. The vibe then was very much like, how do I be a part of that? If I can, everything will be great. And so I went in and I interviewed for a position and all of that, sat with Bill and chatted and all of that, and very gracious, very awesome. It was amazing. And I remember I walked into the condo and I'm in a suit and I'm like, what the fuck am I wearing a suit for? But this was also like the first job that I'd ever really interviewed for in the creative arts or anything like that. Like I didn't know the studio vibe. I was used to the corporate look of you put on a suit and a tie and you go in and you're very buttoned up and prim and proper. And that's what a job interview is.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I was raised as well, very traditional. I didn't know that that was a thing yet. And like even when I interviewed for my TV job, that's what I did, and that's what it was appreciated. The guy that ran this TV station, I didn't know at the time, but was on the board of the private school that I went to. So he appreciated that as well. Like, oh, come in here and you're in your suit and all of that. And so I go out there and I'm in my suit and I'm like, oh, fuck. Like, what the fuck am I doing?
And Bill's
I'm like,
probably
I
wearing
remember I'm
a
like trying
t-shirt
to
and
roll up my
shorts.
sleeve. Yeah, exactly. Everybody's in shorts or their t-shirt, they're buttoned up, and somebody else is just walking in the background, like, "Hey, what's up, man?" And I'm like, "This is weird." He's kind of like interrupting the interview, and I'm like just watching them work and all this, and I'm like, okay." And I left, and I'm like, "Zach, you're such an idiot. You're so dumb." And Bill was very, very gracious afterwards. Like him and I emailed back and forth quite a bit, and gave me a little bit like, it's cool. Let me just tell you a little bit about this industry. Because I didn't, he could tell very much, this guy doesn't know how the creative industry works. It's fine. It's okay. But he could see it in my face, I think, and really helped me out. And so it's like, I'm putting my resume together, send it off to him. And he goes, he goes, let me tell you this. And he did it in a very gracious way, probably much more gracious than I can even say. So if it comes across as him being preachy, he was not at all. It was extremely helpful. But he was like, I've never seen anybody in the creative industry not have a creative resume. He's like, you've got to show me up front that you know design, that you know how to do this, or that you can creatively think in one way. So the fact that you've got all just text on here, it's not a great start. See if you can come up with something better. And I was like, holy shit, how did I never think about that? And I remember he goes, one of the most creative ones that I saw was somebody said, top 10 reasons why you should hire me. And it was a play on like David Letterman's top 10 list. And I was like, I gotcha. And I was like, that always stuck with me then. That's like, if you're doing resume, you're applying for a creative job, really, it was kind of my first lesson in know your audience.
Mm.
And is there any way to know your audience a little bit better? So even if you're going in for your job interview or all of that, what is the environment? Is it corporate? Is it creative? Is it a little bit of both? What do they know? What do they do? Can you find this stuff out? Can you figure it out ahead of time? And tailoring the experience, because that is a lot of the creative arts as well. And I always thought about that, and I think about that every single time I'm designing out a new resume. That I'm like, oh, what would Bill think about this, or what would the hiring manager think about all of this? So it's like when I think about getting back to work, I always think about that experience because I was like, that's where you want to go, but you got to figure out how to get there and get what you want out of it. And I didn't want to wear a suit. I would have loved to have been in that office. And now I'm not going to say the suit is the reason I didn't get the job or anything like that. And I've talked to him since afterwards. But it speaks to again of with we should be working. It's like, that's not even what you wanted to do. You don't want to go be buttoned up, wear the suit all day. That's not what you wanted. You wanted a much more relaxed environment. You wanted what was there. And that's kind of how I built my offices going forward is that I was like, me and my buddies, we'd hang out. We build our office out the way that we want to. We're in jeans, shorts, and we never wanted to leave. We loved those places, but I think it was always a good lesson for me to, again, what are you actually chasing here? And how are you trying to get there? And what message are you sending out? That I always thought was a very good lesson from Bill, and I'm sure influences from yourself as well. So
Yeah.
it was a good one for me.
Yeah, I remember when we would get resumes, and Bill liked to when designers were creative with their resumes and with their portfolios, because I mean it's a creative job, so we really wanted to just see
Yeah.
portfolio, like what can you actually do. Um, and many people would come in with a suit, or they would come in all buttoned up, or they wouldn't, or they'd be students with like a fresh portfolio. But it was always like you could see their nervousness or their like desperation to get a job, and I really feel for those people because I've been that way too, and I feel like me being in those shoes is so not where I want to be. That's why part of the reasons why I just do it myself because I don't like trying to impress somebody else and trying to so if I ever do go into an interview, I just feel like I just need to be exactly who I am and be myself, and it's like be authentic and share with them who I am, and if I can help them, I can help them. I don't like this idea of or the feeling of impressing people or trying to
Yeah.
tailor yourself into what other people want, and then you get the job, and then now you have to be that role, and then maybe you can finally relax, But it's like that's even if you can get the interview, I mean, did you
Yeah.
actually get to sit down with Bill? Is a great thing that you got to do. It's rare to even get a call back, and it's tough.
Exactly, and I feel like it's gotten even worse in today's day and age. But yeah, I mean
Yeah.
that was still part of a little bit of that old era. But yeah, despite it, I remember I was like sweating like a pig afterwards. That I just felt so out of my element afterwards that I'm like I'm sure the nervousness, the total not being relaxed at all, and who knows what the hell I was saying because now, again, it was very much of like for lack of a better term, or not to stereotype my own experience with Hollywood, but it's like, that kid that's just bright eyed and out for his first job. And it wasn't my first job or anything, but it's like, I'm going to tell
Hmm.
them everything that I want to hear. And you can just smell the desperation dripping off of me of like, I need you to like me right now. Of like, who knows what the hell I said to try to like be like, I'm sure I said some of the stupidest stuff in the world. And like, you have no clue what you're talking about, do you? I'm like, no, I just want you to like me, please. Please just like
Yeah.
me.
Please like me. Please hire me. I need money.
Yeah, but it was one of the better interviews that I ever had where it was nice to just sit down with somebody and see like it was a very good lesson then for hiring other people that it's like as a hiring manager as well, you should probably sit down as yourself as opposed to somebody else. It's going to be a much better experience that way where I was like I didn't feel like I was interviewing with a job or a company. I felt like I was interviewing with a person.
Hmm.
And even like speaking a little bit with Oliver, like the same way, where it was just like, oh, this was just more, I'm just talking with people as opposed to like, I need to get hired by Go Media. It's, you'd be working with Bill and Oliver and Jeff. We're guys, like we better get along. So
Yeah, I don't
it
think
was
we
a
were
very
the
good
norm
lesson.
though. I think that we were kind of an outlier. Like, working out of Bill's
Yeah,
apartment, everyone has this like chip on their shoulder, anti-corporate we didn't want, we kind of identified ourselves as the opposite of the corporate environment. So, yeah.
Yeah, it was the perfect time for the age because I think it's in some ways a lot of the stuff is caught up with that now, and people have kind of adopted this, outlier, rebellious punk attitude almost too much now.
Oh,
Where
yeah.
I'm so tired of people calling themselves like we're the Navy SEALs, we're the punk, we're the rebels. I'm like, yeah, you and at 50,000 other creative agencies telling me how you're the punk and you're the rebel, and you're not. And now it's come full circle. But I think that was kind of the around the time of the original invention of that. So well, with that, I think we can wrap it up here. And Jeff, great chatting with you again. Everybody out there, look forward to the comments. Love to hear about any of your experiences early on, any mentors that you guys have had, and what you're thinking about the show so far. So thanks for listening. And this is We Should Be Work episode 2. Or We Should Be Work. We should be working. I should be working on, practicing signing off. So have a
Hey,
great
we'll
week,
get it.
everyone, and we'll chat soon.
All right. See you guys.
That's stupid. I'm not doing that.